Today, I'm going to talk about empathy and why it's so hard for people to put themselves in other people's shoes and understand why other people are the way they are and why other people do the things that they do. This relates to the bigger picture of duality and the belief that every person is a unique expression of a shared consciousness. This is more like philosophical than I typically get on here, but I'm going somewhere with this. I think that it's difficult for a lot of people to understand why other people do the things that they do because they can't imagine themselves making the same decisions that they see someone else making. And part of that is, I think that in general, a lot of people recognize that people are a product of their environment and that someone's outlook on life is a product of the experiences that they have had since they've been alive. Even though someone else may have beliefs that don't make any sense to me, clearly they make sense to that person from their perspective, and so they must have a different perspective than what I have, that they can think this thing that makes absolutely no sense to me, but it seems to be true for them. But a big part of it that is missing for a lot of people that I want to show an example of this just to illustrate what I'm talking about is the fact that two people can have experiences that from the outside appear to be identical. But then if you ask them to describe the experience that they had, they'll describe it in completely different ways. And then it's like they had two completely different experiences. So yeah, people will say, well, I had the same life experience and I don't do the things that that person does. And it's like, even if you had life experiences that look identical to the life experience that this other person had, the way that you experience those events and the way that your brain process the experience of it is not going to be the same. It can be very different. And I have an example of this. I have like a real example of this. I like to sing, and so I've posted a couple of videos of me singing on my other YouTube channel that I have for my music. I posted a video recently of me singing the song Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, and then I cut some parts out of it to make shorts, and one of them is the outro where people typically will do some type of vocal improv and different people do it different ways, and it gives you a chance to kind of be creative. And there's not one correct way to do it. It's like a part in a song where you play a guitar solo and then you just like, you just do whatever you feel. And so I did that and I posted it, just the vocal solo part. I'll play the clip for you just so that you understand what I'm talking about here. Right, so listening to that, it should be obvious, even if you don't really know that much about music, that I'm coloring outside the lines and I'm singing the wrong notes. And I'm singing notes that don't even actually exist in standard Western music. Not only are they not in the same key as the song, but they're not on the piano at all. They're the notes in between the notes. And to me, this sounds, it sounds spicy and cool. And then to a couple of other people that I'm friends with in real life, you know, I let them listen to it and they also thought that it sounded spicy and cool because they experience music the same way that I do or a similar way that I do. But when I posted it on YouTube, I put text on the short that says, if these notes are wrong, why do they sound so right? And then the comments that I got were like, these notes sound wrong. I'll just read the comments that I got because I thought it was super cool. So yeah, I'm gonna read the comments that I got. They don't sound right at all. Another one was, it's the chords that are wrong, and then a little smiling emoji. And the next one is, I think a couple of them were right. And this person says, maybe they just feel right to you, LOL. But yeah, like I believe these people, that I believe them that when they listen to that, they only experienced it as wrong, out of tune singing. And then I also believe the people that I know in real life. I don't think that they would lie to me and tell me that they thought it sounded good if it sounded bad. I mean, maybe they're lying to me. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments what you think about this. Cause like, to me it sounds spicy and cool. And also, the beginning of that song, the lyrics are, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. And what could a secret chord possibly be talking about? Like, what could those words mean? So I feel like it's like appropriate in the context of the song to do that type of microtonal improvisation. That's what I'm doing. The thing is that in modern Western music, we have this convention where we use 12 notes. The notes that are on the piano, the 7 white keys and the 5 black keys, those are the only notes that are available in Western music. And there's a reason for that. But that doesn't mean that those are the only legitimate sound frequencies that could possibly be used in music. It's just a convention. And it's actually not, I mean, it's not universal, because in other cultures, they use different scales. They have notes in their music that you can't play on a piano. The Western chromatic scale is a 12-tone musical scale consisting entirely of successive half steps or semitones, encompassing all available pitches within the Western equal tempered system. It's the foundational set of notes for Western music from which all other scales, modes, and chords are derived. And so this is a convention in Western music where we intentionally limit the available frequencies that are allowed to be in music, in Western music. And for most people, this is fine and it doesn't cause them any problems. The reason for that is because most people, when they're children, their brains do this thing called synaptic pruning, where any connections that are not being used just get pruned out. Your brain just deletes them. When a baby's born, they have a bunch of connections in their brain, many more connections than an adult has. But then over the course of the first, 5-6 years of their life, most of those connections get pruned out because they're not used. But in autistic people, one of the things that has been observed is that the synaptic pruning process is abnormal and it doesn't happen the same way for autistic people that it happens for everyone else. And so autistic people can end up with a lot more connections persisting into adulthood, or a lot less. It just depends. Either presentation can occur. And then sometimes people have more connections in one part of the brain, but then fewer connections in another part of the brain. And they have the different parts of their brain processing a certain type of information than what, most non-autistic neurotypical people process the same information in a different part of their brain. And for me, the neurons that can process and perceive very fine-grained tonal nuance have persisted into adulthood for me. And so I'm able to appreciate the sound of non-standard intervals, basically. And so are some other people, clearly, because I'm definitely not the first person to do this and use pitch frequencies that aren't part of the standard chromatic Western scale. There are entire subgenres of music in which people incorporate microtonality. But I understand that for a lot of people it just sounds wrong. They don't perceive it as being musical. Their ears are hearing the same thing that my ears are hearing, but their brains don't have a category for it. It's like a legitimate musical choice, but it's very niche because most people don't enjoy the way that it sounds. It just sounds wrong to them. Their brains can't process that level of tonal nuance because the music that they've been listening to their entire lives doesn't have any of that in it. It has the intervals in it that it has, and then there's no other intervals. But it's not true in any objective sense that those are the only correct notes. It's a convention. I also want to say that I struggled with singing a lot when I was younger. When I first started singing, I frequently would get told by people that I was tone deaf. That's a thing about, I guess, my own personal experience of music, is that none of the notes sound wrong to me. I mean, it sounds wrong if I'm trying to produce one pitch and then another pitch comes out. Like, yes, that sounds wrong. But if I'm improvising something and the sounds coming out of my mouth are the sounds that my brain intended for me to create, I don't understand how that could be wrong. But I understand now why it sounds wrong to other people. Something else about 12-tone equal temperament that really messes with a lot of people, especially if they have the type of nuanced tonal perception that I have. So harmony is sort of an emergent property of sound. Any sound that you hear, unless it's like a pure sine wave, there's these overtones that happen. And so like if I just go la, it's not just one sound. There's the fundamental, which is like the loudest note that you hear, but then there's these other pitches that happen. There's overtones that come along with that are based on ratios of the fundamental. Every time you hear a sound, you hear this. But people don't really notice it or think about it, but it's there. So the fundamental is one frequency. The second overtone is twice as many, which is the octave. So it's like the same note, but an octave higher. And then the third one is 3 times the fundamental. And the fourth one is 4 times the fundamental. And the fifth one is 5 times the, like it's just multiples of it. If you just derive pitches, frequencies from the overtone stack that's present in all sounds, and then reduce them by subtracting octaves from them until they get back into the same octave, you'd end up with a series of pitches that is like close to what the major scale in 12-tone equal temperaments is. But some of those notes are a little bit off. It's not exactly those pitches. And the reason why is because if you have a piano and you tune it to this, it's called just intonation when you use the natural frequencies that are present in all sounds. If you tuned your piano that way, it sounds good in one key. But then if you move to a different key, it's out of tune. Like it's not the right intervals, because it's relative to the fundamental. And so anytime you change keys that you want to play in, you would have to completely retune your instrument, which is like ridiculous, and who's going to do that? And so they came up with 12-tone equal temperament, which is a compromise where they said, we're just going to shift these relationships around a little bit to make it to where they're equally different from the next one. And so then anywhere you move on the piano and start your scale, it's going to sound the same. Like the relationships between the notes are the same. And this works great for a lot of people, for most people, because of the synaptic pruning thing. Like their brains just get trained to accept that those are the right notes and that all the other frequencies are not right, like their instrument's out of tune if they hear those notes. But for someone like me, whose brain did not do that, who still perceives all frequencies as equally valid, first of all, none of the note relationships sound wrong to me. They just sound different degrees of like harmonious to dissonant. They sound like spicy or not spicy, depending on how dissonant they are. But like when I was a kid, you know, people that are your music teachers at school, their experience of music is that these notes are the right note. The notes on the piano are the right notes. And if you sing other notes, they're wrong. You're singing the wrong note. And so it's like this very like black and white, like right and wrong. You know, you must color inside the lines. You cannot color outside of the lines because it is not, it's, you're doing it wrong in that case. And I just like, it took me forever to understand what was happening. And now I do understand what's happening. And I think it's like a really cool example of the way that two people can have experiences that from the outside look exactly the same. But from the inside, because of differences in how their brains process information, it feels completely different. So yeah, I think that neurodivergence is like it's a big factor in why people have such a hard time empathizing with other people. Because they don't understand that there are differences in sensory processing between individuals. But anyway, so if you accept that is true and that people's sensory experiences are different, understanding all of this can really help with empathy. It's like a logical bridge to get to the idea that it's absolutely possible that all consciousness arises from the oneness, the great I am. And then we came here to experience ourselves and experience each other and, you know, break apart into duality and then come back together into oneness and all that. Because you might say, you know, if you can't ever imagine that you ever would believe the same things that somebody else believes or do the same things that somebody else does, and you say, even if I had the same experiences as that person, I would never become the way that they are. I mean, I don't think that seems true. I think that the misunderstanding here is that you think that because you have had experiences that appeared from the outside to be the same experience that that person was having, and you reacted in a different way, that there's something fundamentally different about like the essence of who you are and like who you were and who you came into this world as, like the consciousness that inhabits your body. And but if you accept that if you had been born as someone else and you had all of the experience that they have had from their perspective, from inside of their body, processed and filtered through their brain, you actually would do the exact same things that they're doing and believe the exact same things that they're believing. And realizing this is really powerful because it sort of collapses duality in a way. Because yeah, you can realize that there's no logical argument against the idea that we're all different expressions of the same consciousness. And like this is a common idea in a lot of religions, and a lot of people believe that this is what Jesus was actually trying to teach people. Anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.